So I don't think anyone really will debate me on this if anyone actually looks into the truth of it. But really, what's happened year after year after year is the government has become more and more dishonest year after year after year. Yeah, maybe people might not like me saying that. People who probably work for the public sector might not like me saying that either. But what's happened here is over time they slightly change the variation of definitions of what they do. And because of that, what happens is the numbers that come out and what they actually are saying for me is so far away from the truth it's not even funny. So, well, first thing I want to get into is the thing I call the liar number. So, what the liar number is it's unemployment, inflation, anything similar to that, productivity, all those sorts of things that they bring out are completely lies, in my opinion. And it's because what they've done over time is Western worlds have changed the way they define inflation. So what I'm showing you here is a thing from a website called Shadow Stats. And what basically they've done here, this is US data, mind you. Mind you, Australia's is very similar. Maybe I'd even argue it's probably a little bit worse. But what this really is showing that in the 1980s, basically a lot of Western governments define inflation in a very similar way. So they included things that they don't include today, like housing, for example, in their inflation figures. Now, they do include housing today, but not all of it. It's just new housing and rents. That's all they include in it. And they don't weight it high enough either. But what they've done since the 1980s is they've changed the definition of how they define it more and more and more year after year after year. So the blue there is the Shadow Stats original CPI, so the original inflation. The orange is the CPI that you're told today. So this is US data. So Australia's does, to be transparent with you, does generally fluctuate a variance of about generally somewhere between 0.5 to 1.5% either side of it. And it's also generally 6 to 12 months after it. But it is still very accurate to the Australian number because we're just behind and slightly out from it. But you'll see here in 2023, we were told the inflation was like, 4%? And it was really like 12.5%, 13%. It was about 12.5% at the time. So, I mean, you've got the government manipulating the data, saying that it's this number when it really isn't that because they've manipulated the way they define it. So that's just something that's going on at the moment. Now, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out how much more expensive things are. I mean, just go shopping and buy things. Like the inflation rate is not 2.5% or 3%. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows it's a lie. To give you an idea, in the mid 2000s, I mean, the government took out the increase of house prices out of the inflation rate in Australia, and that is one of the major ones. A thing that's not in there is tax as well. Like, how is tax not in inflation? Pretty much every working Australian pays tax. And taxes, I'm not only talking about income tax, I'm talking about council rates, I'm talking about water rates, I'm talking about parking rates, I'm talking about even GST, I'm talking about as well even things like your council rates, I'm talking about your rates you pay for your car, anything that is public service should be in inflation. All of that is taxation. Every single bit of it's taxation because I don't really know what you're paying for when you pay already 35 to 45% tax or whatever it is, right? And then you have to pay council rates and all this other crap on the top of it. So anyway, just what you need to know as well is, so even with unemployment, the government took out for people who haven't got a job within 6 months, you're considered no longer you're not considered unemployed anymore. That was in the COVID period, okay? So what's going on here is a straight lie. It's a straight lie. You don't believe what's going on and what the government tells you. It's just not the truth. So just look at Shadow Stats, and you don't have to take my word for it. Even if you don't like me saying this and you are someone who works for the government, just go and look into the history of the biggest argument you can make against Shadow Stats and what I'm saying is technology has played a large part in revolutionizing inflation and what we inflate. That is true. I don't disagree. But how can you then argue that existing housing, existing food, and existing infrastructure, and especially taxation, isn't a part of the inflation rate? Like, that does not make sense at all, really. Like, yes, food is, but they don't do it to the right level. They don't do it to what is an absolute necessity. They just say food in general. That's just what they do. So anyway, that's the first thing. I know I'm starting the episode kind of with a bang here, but I mean, I'm just speaking facts. I don't really care about what anyone thinks. So that's the first thing we got to know. Now, also based on that, and this the second point I just want to go on into here is just because of the inflation rate, that determines the money printing that goes on with the Federal Reserves around the world, and especially the RBA in Australia. So you'll just see here the currency money supply here. Then you'll see the M1 and M3 money supplies here. And you can just see money printing is just going through the roof. And I mean, that's been the case for a long time, and it's not getting any better. I can tell you that right now. It's such key thing to what's going on in the world, because we don't have a dollar based on productivity. It's not based on the gold standard. It's not based on our resources. It's based on nothing. So it's just based on the lie number they bring out of inflation, which I've already been into. So what's going on here is what is happening is they print more and more money, whenever anything goes wrong. And the reason they do that is very simple. The more and more you print money, the more and more inflation you get, which therefore, eradicates the government debt. It eradicates it away because the value of the dollar goes down. So that's the reason why they do it. And the worst thing about this, and funny enough, when the more and more they do this, the more and more funny it benefits probably someone like me and a lot of other people probably who do own investments and that kind of thing too. But the more and more they do this, the more and more things inflate, which actually makes things worse. And the reason for that is because when things inflate, it is very much so only a small percentage of people that can buy the assets, because when things inflate, people's actually necessity spending has to go up because food, water, rents become more expensive. So what happens is you squeeze out the next percentage that can now afford assets. Now, this is a very common thing among capitalist countries who don't base. So capitalism, in my opinion, does work, and there are going to be people that hate me saying this, but it only works when you base it upon something real. It doesn't work when you base it upon something real in competition. It has to be based upon something real in competition. You can't have absolute monopolies going on in the market and money printing based on nothing real, because what happens is the very wealthy, they squeeze out the next people that can buy the houses. So at the moment, it's about roughly, for the average dwelling, only the top 12% of Australian income earners can afford to save the deposit and buy the actual house. Now, when this goes up for the next probably 1 to 2 years or so, right, what you'll see is that the 12th and 11th percentile will get squeezed, and it'll only be the top 10% that can afford assets. So that's the issue with money printing. That will continue. I hate to say that, but it's set to continue based on what we do, especially on the lie number that we have that comes out. Furthermore, undersupply and increasing demand. So it's probably an unpopular topic to talk about, and I have a lot of friends. I am from an immigrant background. My father escaped the Vietnam War, don't get me wrong. I am from an immigrant background, but the level of immigration that we've got is astronomical. It is very, 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 very high. And I'm not against immigration at all, not one bit. If you have very high quality people coming in, I mean, people who can build homes, doctors, engineers, mathematicians, people in industries that we actually need, particularly in construction and I'd probably say sciences for Australia. So math, science, construction. Construction is maths and science. Pardon me in saying that, because even a plumber needs to know how to add 1 and 2 together, add pipe to pipe together. Builder knows how to put a house together. They need the engineer to actually certify the scientific, actual foundations of the home and everything like that too. So, I mean, what I'm saying here is math, science, construction, most important. But what's going on in Australia is we don't even actually have enough people in those sectors that are actually coming in to help those areas, and we don't even have enough people in those sectors to actually build up the amount of people we're bringing in. So we have continuing increasing demand and continuing increasing undersupply. So it's not a good thing for the country. I'm not against immigration at all, but for people that want to understand a country that did it well, and it is a much smaller country, look at somewhere like Singapore. It was broke a lot of years ago when it basically came out of the hold of Malaysia. And they have immigration, a lot of it. They got a very diverse sort of background, but they only bring in people who are productive and can contribute to the country. That's the key thing. I'm not having a crack at anyone who is a worker and works full time and can contribute to the areas that we need contributions for. Not having a crack at that, but really we need to drastically change this, and we need to drastically decrease the demand and increase decreasing that, increase the percentages of people that can come in and help the supply side of things, because You can look at some government data, and they said if we decrease it by 15%, I think it was, in the next few years, you'd have to, I can't remember the name of it, there was an actual government, actual public sector report that came out. If we decreased it by only 15% and increased it slightly, the sort of people we're bringing in, we'd actually have a housing surplus, but we're not doing that at the moment, and that's the issue. So Matusik here shows you that. It shows you exactly what's going on with the population, predicted to be over 34 million in a medium series. A lot of people might say, particularly if you're a government worker, and you believe in the system, you might say that this is bullcrap, but I think it's actually accurate because pretty much Matusik's been doing data for more than 10 years now, and theirs has probably been more accurate than any government data you'll see, as because Matusik goes on what is, not what they say. That's why. Watch what they do, not what they say. That's the way you need to act, and I think Matusik's very accurate in that sense. So, I mean, just to get in a little bit more, the wealth really in Australian households is stored really in residential real estate. So you'll see here alone, if we just look at this data here, owner-occupied housing, this is from Anglicare, and this is via SBS. This was, I think, in 2021 or 2022. Don't quote me on that, just search it up. It was past 2020s anyway. Owner-occupied housing, 38%. Investment property is then 20%. So alone, that is 58% of it. Now, to give you everyone an idea, superannuation, more than half of that is in either real estate investment assets. A lot of people self-manage buying properties now too. So you could say another 10% on that. So that's 68%. Financial assets, more than half of that also is in rates or other sort of trusts or any things like that. So if you even take half of that as well, that's probably around 74%. So that's nearly 3/4. And I could argue, I actually think this is even low compared to what it is today. It's probably somewhere between around the 80% mark where, should I say, we're at in terms of the Australian residential real estate market. You could say commercial as well should be in there too, but the real estate market does dominate all our wealth. So I hate to say it, but especially with things like the 5% deposit scheme coming under, the market is, our country is basically some resources, a little bit of finance in it, and banks in between it, and residential real estate. That's our whole country, kind of the economy. So they're not going to let this fall not without a revolution at the moment. It's going to take a number of years because there is so much of a vested interest in it, and anyone who would let it fall will probably be voted out immediately come the next election. So that's kind of where residential real estate is, I'd just say, at the moment in the Australian landscape of where wealth is stored. We have further things as well, such as increasing loan terms. So this is just something that was literally only announced literally in September. So Great Southern Bank has launched a new 40-year home loan, marking as the solution for first-time buyers to enter the housing market. So they're not the only one to do it. I think UBank and a few others are already doing it. I mean, I know the Big Four already have the platform to launch it whenever they deem necessary. So this is coming. To give you an idea, speak to people of an older generation. There were times where a 15-year mortgage was common, then a 20, then a 25-year. Now it's a 30, a 40-year is coming. I can tell you that right now. Now, what this does is it increases your borrowing capacity because it lowers the monthly, fortnightly, or weekly mortgage repayments you have to pay to the lender. Now, this is advantageous to a lender because at every step of the way they make more money, because if there's a longer term, it means there's more interest paid. And obviously, because it's front loaded with interest, you pay a much higher amount of money back to a bank. So it's very profitable bank. So they're always going to want to do this. And the government's going to back it as well because it brings in through more revenue, which means more taxation and significantly more money coming into the government's hands. So this is another reason why it is another financial and political thing that is going on, and why it is set to continue. 40-year loans are here to stay, and they're here to actually even expand to a lot more lenders in the future. Not only that too, but Australia is a very different market. So here's not every single, but this is not every single. This is probably 1/5 of what the government is doing to keep the market afloat. But these are a few of the key things that are keeping the housing market afloat. So policies Increased demand, first home buyers grants and schemes, government-backed incentives guarantees, 5% deposit schemes, one, low interest rates, cheaper money mortgages, stimulating demands, high immigration rates, growing population, increasing supply for housing rather, putting pressure on supply, lack of social housing, reduced government-built social housing, policies that constrain supply, restrictions on land release and zoning, limited availability of land, over-regulation, taxes on construction, building regulations, excessive taxes, infrastructure costs for developers when infrastructure development costs are shifted from governments to developers. Government approaches and their impact. Focus on more money in the market. Plans to inject more money into the market. Insufficient action on social housing. A historic decline in social housing provision. Political influence of homeowners. Policies that benefit homeowners who form a large voting bloc. So these are this is like, I think it's a fifth of all the policies and things that are going on that impact the housing market. So even if you were to take two of the key ones out of this, let's say you take out, I don't know, restrictions on land release and zoning, first home buyer grants and schemes, there's still, it's like an entity worth of, housing, should I say, policy and financial policy that is literally pushing this market to the roof and going to continue to do so. So look, those are really the financial and political pressures of the Australian housing market. I'm sorry if people didn't like it, but all of this, I'm telling you right now, is truthful to a major level. You might not like me saying it, you might disagree in some levels, and that's okay. But I don't think anyone can doubt that these are very true measures that is actually going on.